This is Amend and Progress, your go-to podcast from Vidori for all things promotional material review. Get ready for actionable insights, valuable perspectives, and best practices to elevate your workflow and team morale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Amend and Progress, Vidori's podcast about the material review process. I'm your host, Annalise, and today we're going to be talking about implementing MLR or content review solutions at enterprise life science organizations, talking through considerations for implementation, best practices, lessons learned. We're sort of getting this firsthand account that organizations can use to consider if they decide to implement a solution at their organization. Joining me in the conversation today is Lesly Marban, President and Founder of Diberin Solutions. Lesly, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here.
Annalise, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So excited to, as I said, sort of get your firsthand account of this, because so often we talk about implementation from that third party perspective. And so really excited to get sort of your perspective on this topic today. But before we get into the questions or the topic at hand, do you just want to spend 30 seconds, a minute, just giving the audience at home a bit of an introduction as to who you are and your background in life sciences?
Yeah, of course. Thanks. And a little background about me. I've been marketing probably for the last almost 20 plus years. And throughout that time frame, I've had the pleasure working with, very large corporate, privately held, as well as Fortune 500 companies, and have been very involved with the MLR process throughout that time frame. And, there's been a lot of changes in the last 20 years, as you can imagine, in MLR. Ways to do it, and also in the tools that are available to marketers. And so I have firsthand experience in actually going from a very paper-based system, which I know some folks still use today, but also implementing an enterprise-wide global solution, which I know we're going to get into a lot today, and some of the learnings that I have had throughout that journey, and especially in implementing a solution across the world, which we can get into a lot of details there.
Super excited for the conversation today. Excited just to tap into all of your great knowledge in this area. Before we get there, as I told you in sort of our pre-record conversations, we start with some hopefully easy getting to know you questions just to give the folks at home an understanding of who you are. So are you up for 3 getting to know you questions this morning?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. My first question is, what is your morning beverage of choice?
Well, I would say it is coffee. I cannot.
Okay.
That might be for a lot of people, but it is my morning cup of joe. I have to have it every morning. Probably the first thing I do is wake up and have a cup of it. And recently I've actually started to add collagen to it, which is something that's probably a little bit more nutritious than just the black coffee. But that is my morning choice beverage.
I love it. I'm the same. It's that thing that you wake up and you're like, can't wait. It's like that first thing you get to look forward to in the morning, at least for me. So completely on the same page there. Second question, what is either your current or favorite hobby?
I have been doing a fair amount of cycling. I lost it for a while, just didn't have the time. But I got back on the saddle, literally, and have started to go about road biking. And now that the weather has gotten better in Chicago, it's one of the favorite pastimes that I have to not only get exercise, but fresh air, and to actually go places with it. And in the wintertime, I do have an indoor bike, so that's one of my favorite hobbies that I have.
I love it. When you're cycling, are you listening to something, or are you just enjoying the surrounding noises of wherever you're, biking to and from?
No, it's really about safety for me. So I'm not really listening to anything other than just the noises and the environment that I'm, riding through.
Good point. Clearly, I'm not a cyclist because I didn't even think about the safety aspect, but you're totally right. That makes total sense. Okay, final question. What is one productivity hack or best practice you use in your daily life?
Yeah, so I have been using a system now for 7 years, and I'm not sponsored by them, and I have no affiliation with them, but I use the Full Focus Planner. It is one of the systems that I've used to really keep me on track to my goals. And the breakdown of it really comes to, setting annual goals, and breaking it up in small chunks every quarter. And within that quarter, breaking it up by week, and then how you're going to break it up by day. And so, for example, if you're running a marathon, that you're trying to achieve, how do you get there? Well, you can't just plan it all in one day. It really takes a lot of effort to train for that. And so it's really breaking down your goals into small chunks that you can actually achieve on a daily basis.
That's awesome. And using it for 7 years, something must be
It's
working or clicking, right?
Yes.
Which is always awesome to hear. Well, that's awesome, Leslie. Thank you so much for entertaining those questions. It's just fun for me to get to know the guests on a different level. So I appreciate it. All right. Enterprise implementations. We're going to go through, there's a lot of nooks and crannies for us to explore today, but I thought we could start by sort of setting the context or the stage in terms of the before. So we'll be talking about, the implementation of the MLR system, lessons learned, et cetera. But what was content review for you like before a system? Can you just help me paint the picture here just so we can, all have like this understanding of like what we're working with, or maybe what were some of the things that prompted you to search for a solution in the first place?
Yes. So one of the companies that I actually worked for, that I led marketing for, we had a system that was really based on the product development review. And it had not been defined for advertising and promotion. And so it was really lumped into the quality management system in a way that had a lot of change control steps. As you can imagine, product development in a quality management system is very rigorous and very in-depth in terms of any changes that have to occur. But advertising, promotion, and anything that was created for marketing was going through that same process. And so depending on the type of promotional item that marketing was trying to bring out to the market, and as with most life science companies, it's really a vehicle that is used, with a sales team to be able to go out and promote the product that the company is wishing to promote. And so because of the way that it was being done, it was taking anywhere between 2 to 6 months to actually go from development through review and then out the door to our sales team. And as a marketer and as a company that wants to get to market fast, you can only imagine having to go through a process that could take up to 6 months to have something out into a customer's hands. And so that was a really, really long process to have to. And we can get into the details of why that was and how we overcame it. But the solution that we had was just not the right solution for what we were trying to achieve.
What was the impact? Because marketing wants to get content to market. That's what we're, there to do. What were some of the things that maybe you were hearing as a marketing leader? Like, what was the impact of this long review time on the marketing team? Were you hearing anything? Was there any sentiment being, expressed back to you? I'm just wondering what the impacts or effects that was having on the team and sort of their feelings about their work or their ability to really get it done.
Yeah, so one of the things that actually helped us with this whole change management process was there was a survey that was done across marketing worldwide. And, the survey was really about satisfaction. Satisfaction with job in marketing, satisfaction with processes, and obviously a lot of different questions were part of that. And one of the top 3 satisfaction issues with marketers around the world was the review process.
Wow.
And so that really was the impetus to have the senior leadership team take notice, because that was something that really bubbled up to the top. And, because of that, we were able then to take action. And so that's how we knew that it wasn't just an isolated case within one part of the company, but it really was ingrained in all of the processes that were going on around the world in getting advertising, promotion, assets out to the market.
Mm-hmm. I imagine. So would you say that was sort of like the tipping point for the organization? Was this survey feedback, or was there something else that sort of really helped the organization decide, okay, it's time to make a change? Sounds like the survey was definitely instrumental in that, but was there anything else that happened organization-wise that really sort of tipped the scales?
Yeah, so two things. One was that survey because it
Okay.
was very evident, and it was not just isolated. It was really systemic. The
Yep.
second thing that really, I think, we all knew was coming is that there were going to be more and more product launches that the company was going to be doing. And so with that, you can imagine from a competitive standpoint, not being able to communicate to customers on a timely basis or get materials out to convey the messages that not only the marketers wanted to do, but the company wanted, was going to be an issue. And those two things, the survey with employee satisfaction, plus the fact that there was a lot of more product launches coming, we knew that that was going to be a bind if we didn't address it.
Of course, sentiment plus volume, there was going to be some problems, right? Or some challenges there. So, okay, that makes total sense. So you sort of have this process that's taking a long time. You've got sort of these tipping point indicators that something needs to change. Let's move into some of the like implementation things that you learned or observations or insights. What were some key lessons you learned in implementing the system at this, global enterprise organization?
That is a great question. And I would say for any organization looking to make a change like this, it really comes down to the change management fundamentals. And, I was really spearheading this change for the organization because I actually knew that there was a better way that we could achieve our goal. And so one of the things that I really followed, and for those listeners who are familiar with John P. Cotter's work, Leading Change, is one of the things that I would highly recommend to really look at this through the lens of true change management fundamentals. And one of the things that I realized that before we implemented any solution, we really had to take a look at our process first. Because the idea was that the solution really it's not necessarily just a silver bullet to fix all problems, but it's really in the people, the process, and in the tool, right? And those are your three-legged, legs of the stool. And obviously the process was one of the biggest things we needed to change. And then the tool would help enable us to be able to make that, system-wide, enterprise-wide. And so, just like with any change management fundamentals, we have to really create the urgency, which is like first and foremost. And the urgency was, again, we had a lot of product launches that were coming out. We knew that we couldn't wait 6 months to get something out the door. So that was really kind of the impetus to really establish kind of that sense of urgency. The second part was to establish a guiding coalition of folks who really cared to make this change. And one of the things that I think was key and instrumental in the change was enlisting the help of our regulatory team. And that is so important because obviously with every MLR process, regulatory is involved as one of the key functions involved in that process. And so having them on our side, I think, was fundamental. And so we had a leader in regulatory that really understood that something had to change because they were also feeling the pressure.
Of course, right. Yeah.
They obviously, wanted to also improve the way that the process was working. And so enlisting regulatory was fundamental, and really other senior leaders that also believed that the change had to occur. And so we enlisted the clinical leader, as well as regulatory to really enable this guiding coalition. And then from there is setting the vision of what it is you want to accomplish. And so one of the things that we did is we communicated it broadly and we communicated it consistently of what we were trying to achieve. Now, I had the fortune of having some benchmarks as to what other life science companies were achieving with their MLR processes. And one of the benchmarks that I came across for med device, which was one of the benchmarks that I wanted to use, was that it could take 2 weeks for review and 1.5 cycles to really be able to achieve probably what I would say close to world-class metrics. And so that became our vision and goal, was to get to a review within 2 weeks and a 1.5 cycle, cycles of review.
Yep.
As our goal. Now, go from 6 months down to 2 weeks seemed like a daunting task, as you can imagine.
Of course.
One of the other fundamental things that I think was key to our success in this change management was establishing this goal for the organization as a whole, so that everybody could get behind it and rally to get to that goal. Now, it wasn't an overnight change. It did take us a year and a half, but we did achieve that. We did end up getting down to 2 weeks and 1.5 cycle times of review, which was pretty significant. And one of the things in the sense of urgency that we wanted to really communicate to the organization was the number of hours that could be saved, but those hours translated to cost. And in the first year, we were able to show almost 2.2 million in cost avoidance from those hours saved, which is
my gosh,
significant.
Wow.
So that was one of our successes that, you want to also communicate to the organization of what was able to be achieved, and what that translated not only from hours saved, but cost to the organization.
An amazing achievement. And it just provides that tangible result, or, what is the return on this investment? We're saving 2 point. I mean, that's a huge number. What an amazing number to sort of stand up next to the implementation and all the things that were happening post the implementation. I mean, so many things that you just said that I feel like we could spend hours on. We're not going to today, because certainly nobody needs to listen to me talk for that long. But there's an incredible amount of intention in all of the things that you just sort of walked through, in terms of this isn't something that you can turn on overnight. It's coalition building. It's aligning the organization under a single vision, communicating that consistency. Like, I just think it speaks to the groundwork that's necessary to be laid to ensure that change management is so successful. Because I think change is hard. Change is really hard. And doing a change at this scale, of course, is very difficult. And so as you were speaking, it was intention. I just kept thinking of, wow, there's just intention being paid to ensuring the organization is sort of brought along with each of these phases to ensure the success of the implementation. Did you have to do convincing from other departments or other folks at the organization that it was worth spending time on that groundwork? Were people eager to just go and implement?
Yeah, I think it's so natural to just want to go. I mean, you said a word there that I think really resonates with me too, is setting that groundwork. And, one of the things that we actually had to do is really slow the process, because, we had partnered with IT to implement a tool and already planning to move forward. And I had to stop the groundswell work that was happening, because we really had to stop and take a look at what still needed to change within our process before we implemented the tool. And one of the groups that we had the most convincing to do was our quality change control team. Unlike maybe some other MLR processes that organizations may have, our quality control team was actually very involved in the process because of change control. And so I knew from other experiences that actually we didn't have to have quality involved in the review. And so just looking at a review matrix alone was one of the biggest obstacles we had, because we really had to convince certain folks that they were actually not required to review certain types of content. And I think that's a challenge for many organizations, to really take a look at their review matrix to see who's involved and why, and to streamline that to the best that the organization can do. And that takes a lot of, conversations and a lot of convincing to help, those functions that may not be necessary to step away.
Sure.
And it is, I say change control was involved. It was really one of those things that it did take quite a bit of effort. Now, I'll tell you something else, Annalise, that is probably another thing that we had to kind of really slow down and deep dive into, and that was in our SOPs, our standard operating procedures. We had up to 52 standard operating procedures just for advertising and promotion. And as you can imagine, from a worldwide global standpoint, I mean, that's just a lot on one particular process. So you can imagine we had to really rein that in, take a look at all of them, and really develop one standard global process, standard operating procedure that really anywhere in the world could take it and implement it. So that's before any tool can be implemented, as you can imagine, right?
Yep.
And then once that process is, aligned to people, get behind it, then you could really bring in a tool like Vidori's to be able to enable that process to then streamline the entire organization in one method of review.
Yep. I think another thing that resonated with me as you were sort of talking through your lessons learned was this idea of bringing in benchmarks as sort of a North Star, or at least a guide of this is where we'd like to be as an organization. And then you indicated it was taking, weeks originally to approve that content. How did you know how long your process was taking before you started implementing? Was that data you were getting back from your existing process, or how did you come to understand how long your process was originally taking you?
Yeah, that was actually a manual process that we had to do, because some of the review was actually happening ad hoc, as well as via emails, via meetings that were not scheduled on a regular basis. And so there was a lot of review that was actually happening outside the system, which is why we wanted to implement a system, because we wanted to make sure it was all contained in one enterprise tool. So we literally, and this is something I would encourage, and it's a great question, because I would encourage all organizations who are looking to improve their process or implement a tool, is to really have that baseline of metrics as to what is currently happening in the organization before the tool is implemented. And for us, we literally had to have a stopwatch and record when something was first reviewed, what type of review it was, right? Because not all reviews are the same. Some are concept reviews, some are actual reviews of the asset or the promotional piece. And so we had to distinguish between the two. And then we had to have someone, and this was really what I did, is made it part of our brand and creative team's process to start literally the time clock and follow a piece through till the end. Now, in organizations, I know this sounds like a lot of work, but it was so critical to be able to show how many hours were saved at the end, what was the true return on investment. But also it was eye-opening to see how long it was taking for review in a sales piece versus media versus a presentation versus a website content. And so it was not only eye-opening for the organization because we didn't have any of those metrics and benchmarks, but then to compare it to the post implementation. And boy, what a difference then you can see in how much the whole entire review had changed. And that's one of the beauties of having a system like Vidori's, is to actually be able to then have it calculated for you without having it be so manual.
It's so important. It's such an important metric to understand. And I think the sort of the more manual study that you did, I mean, what a microscope on the process. Not only are you understanding the time, but some of the nuances that you would be unable to understand otherwise. And so I do think, to your point, for organizations that don't understand what this looks like before they implement a system, it's a huge basis of what a microscope into your process can uncover so many things that you otherwise wouldn't know. So often we just hear, well, we're not really sure how long it takes. And I think it's so important to maybe put time and effort into that because of all the things you can learn from it. When you had the benchmarks, knowing how long it was taking, and then you had these benchmarks of, a couple of weeks and 1.5 circulations, was there any disbelief of like, there's just no way? Or was it like exciting for the team to have sort of this benchmark or this North Star to be striving after? Was it inspirational, or did you come up against any sort of like disbelief or pushback of there's just no way that's possible?
Well, interestingly enough, I actually thought they were very aggressive to try to achieve the benchmarks. And I had another leader in the organization say, why would we settle for less than world class? And I think I used that as a rallying cry for the organization to really rally everyone behind an aspirational goal that people can get behind, because it wasn't something we made up. It was something that actually was data from multiple sources, from multiple companies, and what they were able to achieve with an enterprise tool. And so it wasn't something that we just said, hey, this sounds good, let's just try to go for it. No, it was hard data that we could say, this is what world class is from organizations. We should not need to settle for less, and let's get behind that goal. Now, we really didn't know if we were going to hit it, but we did. And so I think that was one of the things that without that goal, without those benchmarks, I think people don't know where their North Star is and what is it that we're trying to achieve. So I think that's super critical to have. And I will say one thing, Annalise, I know that it seems daunting to kind of calculate what the current metrics are in an organization if it's done manually. What we did is we just did a small sample, and we did for 3 months, and some organizations can even maybe get it down to less than that. But it's just such an important before and after that I would encourage everyone to be able to show, because it really then becomes, such a success afterwards to be able to communicate it to the organization. And not everybody can implement it, globally. We had to, and we had to convince our global counterparts that, it actually works.
The data, it makes such a huge difference for understanding the process, understanding where you're trying to go, and just everything in between. And so it's just really helpful to sort of hear how you navigated that, and obviously had amazing success with it. All right, we're going to close the conversation, but I just wanted to ask one final question around why you think this is so hard. We hear from organizations that change in this area is it's so hard. They're not sure where to start. There's a lot of moving pieces internally, convincing, pushback, a whole host of reasons. Why is this so hard? And what would you say is like one piece of advice you would leave organizations with that are really trying to implement a system and improve their process?
I think it's very hard, especially when organizations have really been using a process that's ingrained, for a long time. I mean, change is hard for anybody, right? It doesn't matter whether it's MLR or any other change that is implemented. Change is always difficult. But I think the one thing that I would say that people can understand is, number one, what is the impact of not changing, right? What happens if there is no change? What happens if there is no improvement in the process? What happens if nothing is done? And I think one of the things that people can understand is, if nothing changes, what is the consequence of that? So rather than just focus on what could be, it's also as important to say, what happens if we don't change? And oftentimes I think people don't talk about that enough. And for us, it was really going to hinder the competitiveness and the speed to market by which we were able to communicate to our customers. And I don't know any organization that couldn't get behind that.
Sure.
So I think that, and really setting the vision of why is it important to make that effort and the change. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but I think chunking it into small bite-sized pieces, and really that guiding coalition, as I mentioned before, of bringing the key stakeholders in early and behind the process, is going to help get through the hard times and the obstacles. Because I think the other thing with the guiding coalition is really having people on there that can take those obstacles away, or help the organization, move some of those big boulders that, may seem daunting to one individual, right? Or one or two people. I think it takes a little bit of an army, if you will, to try to get through it, but it is absolutely doable. I can attest to that. And the outcome of it in the end result is such a difference, that, I think having that vision is so important to be able to see that.
Incredible. What a perfect way to end the conversation today, Lesly. I just so appreciate your insights and perspective here. I learned so much today, so I have no doubt that the listeners did as well. So thank you so much for coming on. It was a delight to have you.
It was so much fun, Annalise. Thank you again for having me.
And folks, the conversation doesn't stop here. Follow Vidori on LinkedIn for updates on new episodes. Join in on the conversation. We would love to hear questions, comments, or topics you'd love us to cover in future episodes. You can subscribe to Amend and Progress on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, this is Annalise signing off for Amend and Progress. Have a fantastic day.